Good evening, I'm Trace Gallagher. It's 11 p.m. on the East Coast, 8 o'clock here in Los Angeles, and this is America's Late News, Fox News at Night. And breaking tonight, the results are astounding. A California school district where just 1 out of 20 kids can do math at grade level says the answer to low test scores is to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money on, quote, woke kindergarten, a program that advocates getting rid of everything from police to whiteness to Israel. But instead of boosting performance, the program has done the exact opposite. Bill Malugin is reviewing the numbers and the curriculum. He's live with more on what he found. Bill, good evening.
Trace, good evening to you. This is pretty wild. This elementary school is up in the Bay Area. They spent $250,000 in federal money for what's being called a woke program to try and boost their low test scores, but all that ended up happening is their test scores fell even further. So take a look. This is Glassbrook Elementary School. It's a predominantly low-income school with mostly minority students. 2 years ago, it was struggling with low attendance and low test scores. So the school decided to turn to an organization that would train teachers to confront white supremacy and disrupt racism and oppression. That for-profit program is called Woke Kindergarten, and the school spent $250,000 of government money for a 3-year contract with it. Well, the results have been unimpressive, to say the least. As a matter of fact, 2 years into this deal, student achievement at the school has fallen. English and math scores plummeted to new lows last spring, with less than 4% of students proficient in math and just under 12% at grade level in English. School district officials defended the program this last week, saying that woke kindergarten did what it was hired to do. And Trace, the San Francisco Chronicle reports the school district actually pointed to improvements in attendance and said the school was no longer on the state watch list. Well, the problem with that is the Chronicle had to inform them that not only was the school still on that list, it had also dropped to an even lower level than they were at before.
Yep, lower on the list. Bill, thank you. Well, the Fox News Tonight Common Sense Department had seen it all until seeing a program called Woke Kindergarten. A San Francisco area school called Glassbrook Elementary spent $250,000 of your money, taxpayer money, on Woke Kindergarten in an effort to improve some of the lowest test scores in California. But the program failed miserably. After 2 years, the test scores are now 4% lower in both math and reading. 4% doesn't sound like a big number until you learn that another 4% loss would put the scores near zero. So instead of 1 out of 20 kids being able to do math, not a single student would properly add or subtract. But the good news is these very same kids are much more proficient in the use of proper pronouns and can now draw pictures using every color in the crayon box, because that's where the focus was. The students were also taught about things that need to be abolished and eradicated, like whiteness, police, borders, schools, landlords, money, jobs, and, oh yeah, Israel, with an assignment asking, quote, if the United States defunded the Israeli military, how could the money be used to rebuild Palestine? So you want kids who can't write to write about Middle East propaganda. Common sense thinks a better idea would be to defund woke kindergarten and use the money to, I don't know, maybe hire somebody who can teach kids how to read. Let's bring in Parents Defending Education President and founder Nicole Neily, Defense of Freedom Institute spokeswoman Angela Morabito, and Democratic candidate for Senate here in California, Christina Pascucci. Thank you all for coming on. Christina, you're sitting next to me, so I'll go to you first.
Yeah.
We're talking about woke kindergarten. I hadn't heard of it until this weekend, but it really is kind of an astounding thing.
And as someone who's 8 months pregnant right now, thinking about my kid's future and her education, it kills you to see this. We are failing our kids on every basic level. What this $250,000 woke program fails to do is to address some of the most basic foundational issues for our children. They're not reading at grade level in California by 3rd grade, 60 to 70% of them. And we should focus on things like reading, writing, and math first. Get the foundations down.
Yeah, and Angela, to you now. Here's the founder of Woke Kindergarten, and then I'll get your thoughts on the other side of this soundbite. Watch.
When I think about a world free of state violence, free of war, free of genocide, I think about a world free of the U.S. empire. I think about a world free of Israel.
founded a program for elementary school kids, hates Israel, hates the United States. What do you think?
That elementary school would have been better off taking that $250,000 and lighting it on fire in the parking lot than letting that person have influence over their classrooms. When you look at what's inside woke kindergarten, it's asking students like how the United States should theoretically be supporting Palestine, or what would happen if we challenged the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. These are absurd questions to ask anyone, let alone a 5-year-old, and doing so is educational malpractice.
Yeah, speaking of educational malpractice, to you now, Nicole, because today kicks off Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action, going on to say that the 13 guiding principles are following. Such principles include fostering a queer-affirming network by freeing an individual from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking. The principles require commitment to doing the work required to dismantle cisgendered, privilege and uplift Black trans folk, and to disrupting the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. What do you think?
I mean, it's really astonishing that we still have districts that are doing Black Lives Matter at School Week after their unabashed support for Hamas. You know, we have children across this country who do not know their ABCs, but they do know HAMAS, and that is unacceptable. If we really want to help disadvantaged children, let's teach them to read and write and not tell them they are victims because of the skin color of their peers.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And speaking, by the way, of California screwing things up, let's bring Christina Pascucci back in here, because I want to put this up on the screen. This is your ballot. You're running for U.S. Senate, right? Yep. And your ballot didn't have any designation. It should be local news journalist, right? It says there nothing. The state Secretary of State has acknowledged they were wrong. They messed up your ballot. This is vital. One of the leading political voices in California, UC Berkeley professor Dan Schnurr, wrote the following, quoting here, Christina Pascucci did everything she was required to do, and she now deserves the same consideration as any other candidate, whether it be Joe Biden, Donald Trump, or any of her opponents in the Senate primary. If her title is not listed on every ballot that all California voters receive, the Secretary of State will need to find another way to give her the opportunity she has earned. Right now, they don't appear to have many options. Right now, they're letting the ballots go. They sent them out, Christina, because it's too much money.
Political analysts are calling this unprecedented, and the reason that everyone should care about it is because it impacts the integrity of our elections. And when we did the polling with my ballot designation and then not having it, my numbers cut in half. So it not only harms my campaign, it harms the integrity of the election. And in order for this election to have integrity, the Secretary of State should do everything they can to make sure that, for example, we send out emails to every registered voter. But right now, they've just sent out a press release that's maybe been seen by a couple hundred people, when there are millions of voters who don't understand that there was something omitted there. And they admitted to that, quote, unfortunate internal mistake.
And that's the baffling part, is the Secretary of State has said we were wrong in this, but we can't fix it because it costs too much money and we don't have the time. It is a disservice to you, Christina. We'll talk about more later. But Angela, I want to get your take on the White House now reviewing this Title IX rule that would force schools to treat students with gender identity about their gender identity instead of their biological sex. Is that a fair assessment?
That's 100% correct. What the Biden administration wants to do is entirely invert the meaning of Title IX and say, well, it's not about discrimination on the basis of sex. They want to redefine the word sex and make it about gender identity. This would mean boys and girls restrooms, locker rooms, and on girls sports teams, even though they like to lie about that piece. And that rule is coming very soon. The American people don't want this, as evidenced by the record-shattering number of public comments this rule received. So the rule is coming soon, but that public outcry is not going away.
And in polls all across the country, Angela, you look at this whole thing and people are against this. And yet here we are, the Biden administration working on propagating this. I'm sorry, Nicole. Let me just go to Nicole very quickly to wrap this up. Sorry, Nicole.
This is actually a rare area of bipartisan cooperation where people across the board, be they Democrats, be they Republicans, be they conservatives, be they minorities, everybody hates this rule. So it's astonishing that President Biden would want to force this through an election year. So you know what? Bring it. He's going to be tied up in litigation, and that's going to hang over his head when it comes to November.
Nicole Neily, Angela Morabito, and Christina Pascucci, thank you all.